Baltimore nights always carried a chill, but this one cut through Cicely like it knew her story. She sat on a cold sidewalk near the inner harbor, 2 suitcases beside her, everything she owned reduced to a pair of handles she gripped just to feel anchored. The street lights above flickered softly, catching the shimmer of tears she refused to let fall. Hours earlier, she had walked out of a mansion worth more than entire neighborhoods, leaving behind marble floors, quiet hallways, and a man who once vowed to love her. Leaving behind David, a billionaire whose trust collapsed faster than their marriage. Now she was here, on concrete, trying to steady her breath, trying to hold herself together. Cars moved past her like she was invisible. People hurried by without a second glance, assuming she was waiting for a ride. But Cicely wasn't waiting for anyone. At least not on purpose. Her fingers trembled as she rubbed her hands for warmth. Her thoughts circled the same painful truth. How did my life fall apart this fast? A gust of wind brushed her cheek and she lowered her head, trying to disappear into her coat. That's when she heard slow footsteps approaching. The kind that didn't rush, didn't hesitate, didn't match the hurried rhythm of the city. She didn't look up. Not yet. But the footsteps stopped right in front of her. A shadow leaned into the circle of light, and a calm voice whispered, "Are you Cicely?" Her breath locked in her throat. Her grip tightened around her suitcase. Her heart thudded once, hard, because she didn't recognize the voice, but the voice clearly recognized her. She lifted her head slowly, eyes widening as she took in the man standing a few steps away. He wasn't someone she knew, not from her past, not from her marriage, not from anywhere. Which raised the real question. How did he know her name? Her pulse hammered as the cold settled deeper into her body. For a moment the world around her faded. No traffic, no voices, no city noise. Just a question hanging in the air between them. A night she already wanted to forget. Everything shifted in that single heartbeat. Have you ever reached a point where life pushed you so low that even kindness felt like a trick? That moment when someone asks, "Are you okay?" And instead of feeling comfort, you feel exposed. As if your struggle isn't hidden anymore. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that their doubt cut deeper than any stranger's judgment ever could? Maybe you've been there before, sitting in your own version of a cold Baltimore sidewalk. Not literally, but emotionally. Where the people who promised to protect you were the same ones who questioned your heart. Where the place that was supposed to feel like home turned into the place that broke you. Where you started believing you weren't enough, not because you failed, but because someone refused to see your worth. It's strange how life works. Sometimes the person you gave everything to becomes the one who looks at you like you're a stranger, while someone you've never met looks at you like they already understand your hurt. So as Cicely stared at the man who spoke her name, her chest tightened with one question many of us have felt. Why me? Why now? Because when everything falls apart, the universe has a way of sending someone or something right when you've convinced yourself there's nothing left to salvage. And Cicely was standing at that exact crossroads, broken, exhausted, unseen by the man she once trusted, yet suddenly acknowledged by someone completely unknown. Cicely's voice barely formed in her throat as she whispered, I'm sorry, do I know you?" The man shook his head gently. "No, but I know you're not supposed to be out here alone." His tone wasn't forceful. Not urgent, not invasive, just steady, the kind of steady that people who have lived through storms carry in their voice. Cicely's eyes darted away, embarrassment tightening her chest. She didn't want anyone seeing her like this, not after walking out of a mansion, not after losing everything that felt familiar. She wanted to disappear into the night, but instead, this stranger stood in front of her with concern she didn't ask for. When she didn't answer, he took a cautious step back, giving her space. "I'm not here to bother you," he said quietly. "I just wanted to make sure you're safe. Safe." A word she hadn't felt in days. Cicely swallowed hard, unsure whether to respond or retreat into silence. Her pride wanted her to send him away, but her shivering hands gave away a truth her voice didn't want to admit. "You look cold," he added. "Listen, if you don't have somewhere to go tonight, there's a warm place not far from here. I can walk you there or call a ride for you. No pressure, just a choice. A choice she didn't have seconds ago." Before Cicely could speak, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. David. His name lit up the screen like it was mocking her. A missed call. then another, then a string of notifications. David hadn't checked on her before, hadn't looked for her when she walked out, hadn't tried to stop her when she packed her bags. Now he realized what he had done, and panic had finally pushed through his pride. Her chest clenched, but not with hope, with exhaustion. The stranger watched her expression shift, but he didn't pry. He simply waited, giving her silence instead of questions. "This isn't romance," he said softly, reading her hesitation the right way. "I'm not trying to get anything from you. I just don't want to leave you here freezing." His sincerity hit harder than the cold wind. Cicely's gaze lifted again. For the first time all night, she didn't feel invisible, a stranger offering safety, an ex-husband realizing he might have lost her. Her entire life shifting at a sidewalk intersection. This was the moment everything changed. So before we step into the rest of Cicely's journey, let me ask you, what would you do in her place? If a stranger offered safety while the person who broke your heart suddenly wanted you back, would you guard yourself and walk away from both? Or would you give life a chance to surprise you? Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will challenge everything you believe about trust, timing, and second chances. This story isn't just about losing everything. It's about discovering what was missing all along. But real quick, before we dive deeper, welcome back to Mr. Dave's Stories, the channel where ordinary moments turn into unforgettable life lessons. If you're watching us for the first time, welcome to the family. Go ahead and subscribe. You won't want to miss the next twist, reveal, or lesson waiting around the corner. And don't forget, liking and commenting helps this story reach someone who might need it today. The glass mansion looked colder than the night air surrounding it, reflecting nothing but the emptiness Cicely felt inside. She stood at the top of the marble steps, the same steps she once walked down laughing, arms wrapped around David, believing she had found a forever that couldn't crack. Now her hands gripped the handles of 2 suitcases, the final proof that forever had an expiration date she never saw coming. Her breath fogged in the air as she stared back at the house. It didn't feel like home anymore. It hadn't for months. Every corner had become a reminder of the moment love turned into suspicion. Every room felt like a courtroom where she stood accused without evidence. And the worst part, the man who once lifted her chin to kiss her now looked at her as if she had stolen something from him. "I didn't marry you for money, David," she had said earlier that day, her voice breaking in places she couldn't hide. But he didn't hear her. He only heard the lies someone whispered into his life, lies that fit the insecurities he never admitted he carried. "You expect me to believe you weren't using me?" he shot back. "You came from nothing. You had everything to gain." Those words were the final crack, the one that split their marriage in half. Cicely didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. Because the moment someone you love questions your heart, staying becomes a slow kind of suffering. Now, standing at the edge of the driveway, she inhaled sharply and stepped into the cold night. Her ride dropped her near the inner harbor, the only place that felt familiar enough to disappear into. But it wasn't until the car pulled away that reality hit her with full weight. She had nowhere to go. She couldn't return to her parents, not because they wouldn't take her in. They absolutely would. But the words they would greet her with felt heavier than her suitcases. "We warned you. Not tonight. Not like this." She walked until her legs trembled, until the suitcase wheels scraped the concrete rhythmically like a tired heartbeat. She ended up near the water, where the city lights shimmered across the dark surface, reflecting a world that kept moving even as hers fell apart. A bus stop bench sat empty beneath a flickering streetlight. She lowered herself onto it, exhaling slowly as her bones settled into the cold metal. Her mind replayed everything. The first time she met David, the way he smiled at her as if she were a rare truth in his overpolished world. The nights they stayed up talking about dreams, the day he said she made him feel more grounded than any success ever had. How did that man become this stranger? Her chest tightened, and she hugged her coat closer. The wind slipped through the fabric anyway, settling into her like the truth she didn't want to face. She was homeless, not forever. But tonight, she had no place to call hers. She rested her forehead on the back of her hand and shut her eyes, hoping the tears wouldn't fall. The last thing she needed was for strangers to walk by, seeing her cry like she was part of the scenery. But Baltimore was loud enough to cover the sound of her quiet heartbreak. Cars rushed by, People talked in passing. A group laughed as they crossed the street. Life was moving forward with no idea that Cicely was stuck in a moment she didn't know how to escape. Her phone buzzed weakly in her pocket. She pulled it out. No new messages from David, no attempts to check on her, just silence where love used to live. Her stomach twisted. She had left because she couldn't stay, but she had hoped, just a small, fragile hope, that he might come after her, not to force her back home, not to argue, just to show he still cared enough to try. But the notification stayed empty. She leaned back and let her eyes lift toward the night sky. A plane blinked overhead, moving steadily toward some destination where someone was probably excited to arrive. Cicely wondered what it would feel like to look forward to something again. Her fingers rubbed her forehead as she thought about her childhood, the sound of her aunties fussing in kitchens, kids racing bikes down cracked sidewalks, music blasting from open rowhouse windows. Back then, she always believed that no matter how tough life got, she would figure it out. Tonight, she didn't feel so certain. The cold pressed deeper into her shoulders, and with every passing minute she felt more like she was disappearing into the background of the city she once loved. She tightened her grip on her suitcase handles, as if letting go would mean losing even more. Her mind kept circling back to the same painful truth. She had loved David genuinely. She hadn't asked for his wealth. She hadn't asked for luxury. All she wanted was a marriage where trust was a foundation, not a fight. But his doubt grew louder than her honesty. So she left. A tear finally slipped past her lashes, disappearing into her collar. She didn't bother wiping it. The wind would do it for her. Another car passed. A couple walked by holding hands. A man jogged past with headphones on. Life didn't pause for heartbreak. A soft vibration startled her hand. Her phone again. Still no message from David. Just her battery warning her it wouldn't last long. She tucked it away, letting out a trembling breath. The truth wrapped tight around her. She had no home tonight, just her suitcases, her tired heart, and the cold Baltimore air. A gust of wind pushed her hair across her cheek, and she closed her eyes, trying to steady herself for the long night ahead. For the first time in years, Cicely didn't know what tomorrow would look like, but she knew tonight would hurt. Before we move to the next part of Cicely's story, I have a little real-life update for you, something I'm grateful to share. Recently, someone messaged me saying one of these stories helped them feel less alone during a difficult moment. Hearing that reminded me why storytelling matters so much. So thank you for being here, for watching, and for letting these stories find a home in your day. If you're feeling Cicely's pain already, hit like so the story reaches someone who needs it. The wind brushed against Cicely's cheeks as she sat stiffly on the cold bench, trying to quiet her thoughts long enough to figure out her next step. Her fingers were numb, her breath shaky, and the exhaustion in her chest felt like it was pressing her deeper into the metal seat. She didn't know how long she had been sitting there. Minutes? Hours? Time had a strange way of stretching itself thin when you were alone with nothing but heartbreak and 2 suitcases to your name. Just when she lowered her head, hoping to hide her swelling eyes from the world, footsteps approached with a slow, steady rhythm, not rushed, not loud, not careless. Those footsteps paused right in front of her. Cicely tensed. She lifted her gaze, and there he was. The same man from the hook, the same calm presence who said her name as if he had been searching for her. "Are you Cicely?" he repeated, his voice softer than the night breeze. Her breath thinned. Yes, do I know you?" The words escaped before she could think, part fear, part confusion. The man held his hands where she could see them, keeping distance that showed he had no intention of crowding her. "No, you don't know me personally," he said. "My name is William." Cicely blinked at him, searching his face for familiarity. Nothing came. He continued, "I've been trying to find you." Her stomach tightened. "Find me? Why?" William exhaled, as if the explanation itself carried weight. His eyes held something she couldn't quite place. Not pity, not sympathy, but understanding. Real understanding. "You helped me once," he said. Cicely frowned. Her life felt like it had been turned upside down in the past 2 days. She couldn't imagine helping anyone during that chaos. "I think you have the wrong person. I don't—" His tone was steady and sure, not forceful. "It was last month, at a coffee shop on Charles Street." Cicely tried to recall the moment. Coffee shop, Charles Street. Her mind searched for any memory that would explain this strange encounter. but everything felt blurry. "I don't remember talking to you," she admitted. "You weren't talking to me," he said gently. "You were talking to someone else, a woman who was crying at her table." Cicely sat back a little. "Oh, her," she remembered now, a young woman with mascara smudged across her cheeks, whispering through tears about a complicated breakup. Cicely had leaned over and offered a few words because she couldn't sit there pretending she didn't hear someone falling apart quietly. "You told her," William continued, "that if someone's love makes you doubt yourself more than you believe in yourself, then it isn't love." Cicely felt the memory land in her chest with unexpected force. She did say that. At the time, she thought nothing of it, just a piece of tough honesty from one woman to another. "I was sitting behind you," William added, "and I needed to hear those words more than that woman did. They pushed me to walk away from something I should have left long ago." Cicely looked down at her hands, feeling both exposed and humbled. It felt strange, being thanked on a night when she felt like she had nothing left to offer the world. Her voice came out small. "I didn't know anyone was listening. Sometimes the right words reach the right person without you ever realizing it," he replied. "So, thank you." Silence fell for a moment, not heavy, not uncomfortable, just a pause where two strangers stood in the space between pain and gratitude. William glanced briefly at the suitcases resting beside her. He didn't stare the way some people might. He didn't jump to assumptions, but he noticed. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The question cracked something inside Cicely. She had held it together since she walked out of that mansion. No tears, no breakdown, no trembling voice. But somehow, being asked with genuine care felt more dangerous than being ignored. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to stay composed. "I'm fine," she said quickly. William didn't believe her. He didn't call her out on it either. He just shifted slightly, giving her room to decide how much he wanted to reveal. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" he asked. Her throat tightened. That question was harder to dodge. She hesitated. I'm waiting for someone," she lied. He nodded politely, though the crease in his brow hinted he knew she wasn't telling the full truth. But he didn't press her. "Okay," he murmured. "If that changes, I'm here." Cicely looked away, embarrassed at how easily he saw through her. Her pride rose to protect her, but her circumstances weakened the shield. William lowered himself onto the far end of the bench, keeping plenty of space between them. His posture was relaxed but respectful. His attention remained on the street, not on her, a gesture that made her feel less exposed. She watched him from the corner of her eye, wondering if this was some strange trick. But nothing about him felt threatening or pushy. If anything, he seemed cautious, as if he didn't want to disrupt her fragile state. After a quiet moment, he spoke again. "I know this is unusual," he admitted, "but I didn't want to leave without saying thank you. Your words pulled me out of a relationship that was draining me. I recognized your face in passing earlier tonight, and, well, I couldn't just walk away." Cicely let out a slow exhale. "So you really were looking for me?" "Yes," William said simply. "You changed something in my life. It felt right to tell you that." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep inside her, a reminder that sometimes kindness returned in the least expected ways. Her eyes drifted toward the pavement. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," he said, "but gratitude doesn't disappear just because life gets complicated." For a moment, Cicely almost smiled, but the wind turned colder, pulling her back into her harsh reality. Her coat wasn't thick enough, her hands were stiff, her heart still ached. William noticed the way she shivered. "Cicely," he said gently, "I don't mean to pry, but you're out here with everything you own. That doesn't look like someone who's waiting for a ride." Her chest tightened. She swallowed hard. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I don't have anywhere to go." William nodded slowly, absorbing her words without judgment. He didn't gasp. He didn't look shocked. He didn't pity her. He simply said, "All right, then let's fix that first." Cicely stiffened. "What do you mean, fix?" "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said calmly. "I'm just asking you to let me help. At least tonight. You shouldn't be out here alone." His voice carried a reassurance she hadn't felt in a long time, not even in her marriage. Cicely looked down at her trembling hands, feeling the cold settle so deeply she could barely feel her fingers. Her pride wanted to push him away. Her fear wanted her to stay guarded. But her reality was written in the 2 suitcases beside her. Her lips parted. I don't know. William leaned forward slightly, not too close, not intrusive, and said, "You don't have to decide everything tonight. Just choose safety for now." The sincerity in his tone disarmed her more than anything else. Her voice broke, small and fragile. "I don't have anything left." William shook his head gently. "You still have you, Cicely, and that's enough to start again." The words hit her like warmth in the middle of a freezing night. She closed her eyes for a moment, holding on to that statement, because no one had spoken to her that way in months, not even David. When she opened them again, she whispered the smallest, bravest word she had spoken all week. "Okay." Cicely stood slowly from the bench, her legs stiff from the cold. William rose with her but kept a respectful distance, as though he didn't want to rush her into moving or overwhelm her with expectation. His presence felt steady, not loud, not commanding, just grounded enough to make the moment feel less terrifying. "Are you sure?" she whispered, clutching the handle of her suitcase a little too tightly. William nodded. "Yes, let me get you somewhere warm. You don't have to figure out tomorrow tonight." The way he said it, calm, not pressing, settled something inside her that had been trembling since she walked out of David's mansion. For the first time in 2 days, she felt a moment where her body didn't tense automatically. Still, her pride whispered warnings. You don't know him. Don't depend on anyone. But another part of her, the exhausted, freezing, defeated part, understood that refusing help tonight wasn't strength. It was survival disguised as pride. She nodded once. "All right." William picked up one of her suitcases only after she gave a small nod of permission. He lifted it carefully, like it wasn't a burden. When he reached for the second one, he paused. "This one's yours," he said gently, "just so you feel in control." That small consideration meant more to her than he probably realized. They walked toward the street, the wind brushing past them as the city buzzed around like a living organism. William's car sat a short walk away, a modest SUV, clean but not flashy. A far cry from the fleet of luxury vehicles David collected like trophies. William opened the back door for her luggage, then opened the passenger door. The heater was already running. The inside carried a soft warmth that felt like a hug she desperately needed. Once she settled into the seat, she let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The warmth wrapped around her fingers, pulling feeling back into her stiff hands. For the first time all night, her body relaxed enough to lean back. "You can adjust the heat if you want," William said once he slid into the driver's seat. "Thank you," she replied quietly. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into Baltimore's night traffic. The city lights stretched in long lines across the windshield, and the gentle hum of the engine filled the silence between them. After a few minutes, William spoke, gently, not wanting to intrude. "You don't have to explain anything, not unless you want to." Cicely stared out the window. "My husband." She paused, correcting herself. "My ex-husband. He thought I married him for money." William didn't flinch or stare. His hand stayed steady on the wheel. "That must have hurt." "It did," she whispered, "more than I expected." She swallowed, her voice tightening again. "He used to look at me like I was the best thing in his world. Then suddenly, he looked at me like I was a thief." "That's a heavy thing to carry," William murmured. Cicely's fingers traced the seam of her coat. He didn't even ask for proof. He just believed someone else's voice over mine. William's jaw shifted, a subtle reaction. When someone allows doubt to replace trust, it changes everything. She nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle inside her. "I tried to explain, but he didn't want to hear me. I walked out because staying any longer would have broken me." "You did the right thing," he said. Cicely blinked, surprised by how firmly he said it. "You don't even know the whole story." "I know enough," he replied. "You weren't staying in a place where your heart was safe." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The quiet in the car felt gentler than the quiet she'd been drowning in earlier. A red light brought the car to a stop, and a reflection in the window made her pause. She barely recognized herself. Tired eyes, messy hair, shoulders rounded from days of carrying emotional weight. The woman in the reflection looked like someone who had fought too long without being seen. "Life hits fast," she muttered under her breath. William glanced her way. "Yes, but it doesn't mean you won't rise again." She swallowed the lump in her throat. Minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of a brightly lit extended stay hotel. The building wasn't fancy. No towering entrance, no dramatic decor, but the lights were warm, the front desk visible through the glass doors, and people moved through the lobby with a casual ease that made her shoulders loosen. "This is safe," William said. "Public, staffed, secure. You'll be okay here." He carried one suitcase to the entrance, while Cicely followed with the other. At the front desk, he stepped back, letting her speak so she felt fully in control. She appreciated that more than she could say. One night, she said to the clerk, her voice soft. William quietly covered the cost before she could argue. When she opened her mouth to protest, he shook his head. "You can build your life again later," he said. "Let's get you through tonight." The elevator ride-up was silent, but not uncomfortable. When they reached her room door, she turned toward him, suddenly unsure how to express everything she felt. Gratitude, fear, confusion, exhaustion. "Why all this?" she asked softly. "Why go this far for someone you don't know?" William leaned against the wall beside the elevator, his posture relaxed but his expression sincere. "Because someone once helped me when I had nothing left. I promised myself I'd pay it forward, and tonight, life put you in my path." Cicely held the keycard in her hand, feeling its edges like it was something unreal. "You don't expect anything from me?" "No," William said. "I just want you to be safe." Her chest warmed, a mix of disbelief and vulnerability. In her marriage, even small acts of kindness had turned into leverage, something used against her later. This kind of pure generosity felt foreign. "You're a good person," she whispered. William shook his head. "Just someone who knows what it feels like to lose more than you thought you could handle." They stood there quietly, sharing a moment of human understanding that required no explanation. When the elevator chimed behind him, signaling someone else needed it, William straightened. "I'll check in tomorrow," he said gently. "Sleep, breathe. You've been carrying too much." Cicely nodded, unable to find words that wouldn't break her voice, but she forced one sentence out. "Thank you, William." He offered a small smile. "Good night, Cicely." As he stepped into the elevator, she called softly, "Wait." He paused. She swallowed her fear and said quietly, "Why do you think this happened? Us crossing paths tonight?" William held her gaze for a beat and replied with a calm certainty. "Life chose you." The elevator doors closed. Cicely stood alone in the hallway, not feeling as alone as she had felt at the bus stop. She opened her room door, letting the warm air wash over her. For the first time in 2 nights, she felt a chance, just a small one, that tomorrow might hurt a little less. She placed her suitcases beside the bed and sank onto the mattress, exhaling a long, shaky breath. It was the first safe place she had been since walking out of the mansion. As she lay back, staring at the ceiling, tears slipped quietly down her temples, not from despair this time, but from relief. She wasn't saved. Her problems weren't gone, but she wasn't freezing on a sidewalk anymore, and someone cared enough to make sure she wasn't. Comment, "Stay strong, Cicely," if you believe her story deserves a turning point. The sunlight creeping through the hotel curtains was the first warm thing Cicely had felt in days. It stretched across the room like a soft reminder that morning always comes, even when you don't feel ready to face it. Her eyes blinked open, adjusting slowly, her body sinking deeper into the mattress as if trying to hold on to the safety it offered. For a moment she didn't move. She didn't speak. She didn't think. She simply breathed. The room was quiet except for the hum of the heater. She stared at the ceiling, feeling a mixture of confusion and relief. For several seconds, she forgot where she was, her brain still halfway in the chaos of the past 48 hours. But then the memory returned, the bench, the cold, William's steady voice, the hotel room key in her hand. Cicely exhaled quietly, rolling onto her side. Her suitcases sat near the door exactly where she had placed them. Seeing them reminded her that even though this room was warm, safe, and clean, it wasn't hers. It wasn't permanent. It was a pause, a needed one, but still a pause between life chapters she didn't ask for. Her body felt heavy when she finally sat up, not from lack of sleep. She slept better than she expected, but from the emotional weight she carried. Everything still felt raw. Her divorce wasn't just a legal ending, it was a tearing apart of everything she believed love was supposed to be. She rubbed her arms and walked toward the small bathroom. When she saw her reflection in the mirror, she froze. Her eyes were puffy, her hair slightly tangled, her face tired in a way no makeup could hide. But beneath it all, she saw something else, something she hadn't noticed last night, A spark of survival. It wasn't strength yet, but it was the beginning of it. She splashed cold water on her face, letting it run through her fingers and drip along her chin. When she straightened again, she inhaled deeply. Today would not fix her entire life. But today she wasn't on a sidewalk. Her stomach growled faintly. She hadn't eaten since early yesterday morning. Embarrassment flickered across her face, the kind of embarrassment that comes when basic needs feel like luxuries you can't afford. A knock at the door startled her. She froze. Her heart raced, unsure whether fear or hope was stronger. "Cicely?" William's voice carried through the door. Calm, familiar, gentle. She let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. She walked slowly toward the door, brushing her fingers through her hair instinctively. When she opened it, William stood there holding a small takeout bag and a drink tray. His expression carried the same careful warmth from last night, steady, respectful, kind without being intrusive. "Good morning," he said softly. "I wasn't sure if you'd be up yet. I brought breakfast." Cicely's eyes widened slightly. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "That's why I did." She stepped aside to let him in, but he shook his head. "I won't come in unless you want me to. I just wanted to make sure you ate something." The consideration in that one sentence tugged at something inside her chest. David had once been attentive like that, in the beginning. But in the later months, she could have gone a whole day without him noticing whether she ate or cried or walked around with a broken heart quietly lodged in her ribs. "You can come in," she said finally, "just for a moment." William stepped inside, placing the bag on the small table near the window. He didn't look around the room or examine her belongings. His eyes stayed respectfully, focused on her, keeping the boundaries she clearly needed. "I got something simple," he said. "Egg sandwich, fruit cup, tea. I didn't know what you liked." "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thickening slightly. "Really, thank you." He nodded. "It's no trouble." She sat at the table and opened the container, the warm smell of food filling the room. Her throat tightened with gratitude she wasn't sure how to voice. She took a small bite, and the taste hit her harder than expected. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it was the first act of care she had received in days. William leaned lightly against the wall, giving her space. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I thought I would," she admitted. He nodded. "Good." They stayed quiet for a moment. Not the silence of strangers, but the kind that allows breathing room. When Cicely finished eating, she wiped her hands slowly and looked up, her gaze heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from honesty that wanted to surface. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Of course." She folded her hands together. "It wasn't just David who doubted me. His family. They never accepted me. Not from the beginning." William listened intently, not interrupting. They were polite, Cicely continued, but the kind of polite that lets you know you're being tolerated, not welcomed. Every dinner felt like a performance. Every gathering felt like I was being measured against a scale I didn't ask to stand on. She swallowed, her voice shaking. His mother once pulled him aside and asked if he was sure he wanted to marry someone like me. William's jaw tightened slightly. "That must have been painful." "It was," she whispered, "but I ignored it because I thought he loved me enough to rise above their judgment. I believe we could build our own world, separate from their expectations." Her eyes drifted toward the window, but those whispers got to him. Those doubts sank in. And when the rumor started that I married him for money, he didn't fight for me. He just believed it. "People who love you should protect your heart," William said quietly, "not hand it over to the doubts of others." The words struck deeply. Cicely's voice softened. "I kept trying to prove myself, trying to show them I wasn't there for what they thought. But no matter what I did, they only saw what they wanted." William nodded slowly. "Sometimes people create a version of you in their minds, and nothing you do ever changes it. That's their limitation, not yours." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away before they fell. "I wasn't perfect," she said, "but I was loyal, and he still pushed me out because someone whispered the right lie at the right time. Or the wrong lie," he corrected gently. She let out a small breath, part laugh, part ache. William checked the time before looking back at her. "I don't want to take up too much of your morning, but I wanted you to know you're not alone today. If you need help figuring out next steps, I'm around. Cicely nodded slowly. I don't know what those steps look like yet. That's okay, he said. One step is enough for now. She watched him walk toward the door. Before he opened it, she called softly. William? He turned. Thank you. Not just for last night, for listening this morning. He gave a small, sincere nod. Anytime, Cicely. When he closed the door behind him, the room felt different, still quiet, still temporary, but no longer heavy with isolation. For the first time since walking out of David's mansion, Cicely felt possible again. The morning air outside the hotel carried the crisp chill of early Baltimore hours, the kind that made the world feel quieter than usual. Cicely stepped out slowly, pulling her coat tighter as she scanned the street. She wasn't expecting to see anyone, especially not William, yet there he was, leaning casually against his SUV with his hands in his pockets. He didn't wave. He didn't rush her. He simply offered a small nod of acknowledgement, as if to say, It's your day. I'm just here to help you start it. Cicely approached him with hesitant footsteps. You didn't have to come back. William shrugged lightly. I said I'd check on you. I meant it. Her chest warmed, though she still guarded her expression. She wasn't ready to place trust anywhere new, but she couldn't deny the comfort his steady presence brought. He opened the passenger door for her. Ready to make a plan? A plan? She repeated, sliding into the seat. He nodded once he settled behind the wheel. Food, shelter, stability. Those things take time. We start with something manageable. Income. She looked down at her hands. I don't have much experience outside of working on David's projects. That's still experience, William replied. You help with charity events, organization scheduling. You have skills. It had been a long time since someone told her she had value beyond the marriage. The acknowledgement softened something inside her. He pulled into traffic. I know a few places hiring temporary help. Reception, event support, clerical. Nothing fancy, but it pays and keeps you moving forward. Cicely nodded slowly. Thank you. The drive was quiet but comfortable. William didn't fill the silence with unnecessary words, something she appreciated more than he realized. They arrived at a shared office building in Midtown. Several small businesses occupied suites inside, a bookkeeping firm, a marketing startup, a small medical office, and a local event planning group. William parked and turned toward her. You won't be alone. I'll wait outside each place. Cicely inhaled deeply. The last time she walked into a professional environment alone, she was with David, and people treated her with fragile politeness because she was married to someone powerful. She didn't know how the world would look at her now. Inside the lobby, she checked in with the receptionist. The woman behind the desk offered a mild smile, the kind that never reached her eyes. Are you applying for the open position? The receptionist asked, her tone already drifting toward dismissal. Yes, Cicely said, holding her voice steady. Do you have a resume? Cicely paused. She didn't. Everything had been on her laptop at the mansion. She swallowed. No, but I can... The receptionist cut her off with a sigh. We really prefer applicants come prepared. Cicely's cheeks warmed with embarrassment. I understand, I can explain. The woman's expression shifted, subtle but sharp. Her eyes drifted over Cicely's clothes, noticing the slight wrinkle in her coat, the tiredness around her eyes. You know what, the receptionist said, lowering her voice. We're not hiring anymore. The post wasn't removed yet. Cicely blinked. But the sign outside, it's outdated, the woman interrupted. Cicely recognized the lie instantly. She nodded slowly, refusing to let the humiliation show. Thank you anyway. When she stepped outside, William was leaning against the railing. He read her expression instantly. No luck? He asked. No. She forced a smile. It's okay. Let's try the next place. They walked to the event planning suite down the hall. The atmosphere was brighter, busier. A woman in her 30s looked up from her desk and greeted them. Hi, can I help you? I'm here about the temporary assistant position, Cicely said. The woman's eyes shifted, not with judgment, but calculation. Do you have experience with event setup, scheduling, or coordinating vendors? I do, Cicely replied. I worked on several charity events and corporate dinners. Oh, with which company? Cicely hesitated, then answered. My ex-husband's firm. That small detail changed the woman's posture. Her smile tightened. I see. I handled logistics, guest lists, timelines. Do you have references? Cicely swallowed. Not at the moment. Emails? Letters? LinkedIn? No. The woman's voice softened slightly, but the decision was already made. We're looking for someone with verifiable experience. I'm sorry. Cicely nodded and stepped back. She knew what this was, doubt hidden behind professionalism. Outside, William met her with the same calm presence. Still no? She shook her head. I don't blame them. But it still hurts, he said quietly. Cicely let out a breath. It does. They tried 2 more places. One employer barely glanced at her before dismissing her with a curt, "We're not hiring." Another asked condescending questions about whether she understood basic clerical duties. By the time she stepped outside the last building, a familiar ache had settled in her chest, a blend of rejection, shame, and the lingering fear that she had lost not only her marriage but her identity. William walked beside her without speaking, giving her space to process. Finally, Cicely whispered, "Is this how people see me now? Like I can't offer anything?" William stopped walking and faced her. People often make assumptions based on what they think they see. That doesn't make them right. She looked down. But it feels the same as how David's family treated you, he finished softly. She nodded, blinking away the memory. There had been dinners where she felt like furniture, acknowledged but not welcomed. There had been glances exchanged over her head. There had been questions disguised as compliments. "Oh, you're from Baltimore? Interesting. You seem very grounded. How did you and David meet again?" No matter what she did, she felt like she didn't belong in their world. Cicely's voice trembled. "It's like I'm back at their dining table trying to prove I deserve a seat." William's expression softened. You never had to prove that. They were the ones who couldn't see beyond their own expectations. She inhaled slowly, feeling the truth of his words cut through the pain. "You're trying," he continued. "That's what matters. Some days will feel heavier than others. But this isn't the end." Cicely wiped a tear that escaped down her cheek. "I just didn't expect to feel this worthless." "You're not worthless," William said firmly. "You're rebuilding. That takes time. And courage." Cicely let out a shaky breath. "I don't feel courageous. Most courageous people don't," he replied gently. They stood in silence for a few seconds as people walked past them, busy with their own lives, unaware of the quiet battle happening right on the sidewalk. "Let's take a break," William finally suggested. "You've done enough for this morning." Cicely nodded. She was tired, not just physically, but mentally. Job hunting while carrying heartbreak felt like climbing a hill with weights tied to her chest. As they headed back toward the car, Cicely whispered, "Do you really think I'll get back on my feet?" William didn't hesitate. "Yes, you have too much strength in you not to." She looked at him, feeling that warmth again, the same warmth she felt last night when he told her life had chosen her. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel less like she was falling, and for the first time today, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't lost. She was beginning again. The ride back to the hotel was quiet at first, the kind of quiet that settles after a long morning of trying, failing, and trying again. Cicely stared out the window, watching the Baltimore streets blend into streaks of gray and soft sunlight. Her shoulders felt heavier than when the day started, her mind looping through every dismissive glance, every condescending tone, every moment someone judged her without bothering to understand her story. William didn't interrupt her thoughts. His hands rested loosely on the steering wheel as if he understood she needed silence more than conversation. He gave her space without stepping away, a balance she wasn't used to. When they stopped at a light, she finally spoke. "I didn't think starting over would feel this rough." William kept his eyes forward. "It's tough for almost everyone, but it hits different when you're starting from a place you didn't choose." Cicely nodded slowly. "Everything feels like a reminder of what I lost, or," he said gently, "a reminder of what you're learning you don't need anymore." His words rested in the air, sinking into her thoughts. When they reached the hotel, Cicely stepped out of the car with tired legs and a mind still tangled in doubt. She paused near the entrance, bracing herself before heading inside. "Do you want me to walk you in?" William asked from behind her. She shook her head. "No, I need a moment alone." "Okay," he said. "If you need anything, I'll be around." She offered a small, grateful nod, then walked through the lobby and into the elevator. The ride up felt longer than it should have, each passing floor whispering reminders of her temporary reality. When she unlocked her room and stepped inside, the quiet hit her immediately. It wasn't the comforting quiet she felt last night. This was the kind that pressed on her chest, reminding her that starting over meant facing uncertainty again and again. She sank onto the bed, exhaling shakily. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. David, 3 missed calls. David, 2 new voicemails. David, 1 text message. Her heart thudded once, hard and unwelcome. She stared at the notifications without opening any of them. She didn't want to hear his voice. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But curiosity tugged at her. Not curiosity about reconciliation. That door had closed when he chose suspicion over love. But curiosity about what he thought he could say now that she was gone. Against her better judgment, she opened the text. David, Cicely, please call me. We need to talk. Her stomach twisted. Talk about what? How he let their marriage crumble because he believed a lie. How he questioned her loyalty while she was giving everything she had. How he sat in that huge house with his pride, while she slept on a bench with 2 suitcases that carried the remnants of her life. Her eyes stung. She turned off the screen and tossed the phone onto the bed like it burned. A knock sounded at her door. She stiffened until she recognized the gentle tone of William's voice. Cicely, it's me. Can I talk to you for a moment? She opened the door slowly. He wasn't smiling. His expression was soft, concerned. You left your charger in the car, he said, handing it to her. She took it, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. He hesitated before asking, Are you all right? Her throat tightened. David called. William nodded slowly, not surprised. He realized what he lost. It's too late, she said quietly. Maybe for him, William replied, but not for you. Cicely stepped aside, and he entered only after she moved completely out of the way. He stood by the table while she sat on the edge of the bed, twisting her fingers together. I don't know what he expects, she said. Does he think I'm going to run back and pretend nothing happened? People who act out of guilt often want quick resolution, William said. Something to make them feel better without doing the real work. She considered that. It sounded exactly like the man she left behind, always ready to fix business problems but never willing to sit in the discomfort of emotional truth. William leaned slightly forward. Do you want to call him back? No. The answer left her lips quicker than she expected. I don't. Not right now. He nodded. Good. She blinked. Good. Yes, he said with gentle conviction, because calling him before you've healed even a little would only reopen wounds he caused. Cicely looked down at her hands, absorbing that. He hurt you, William continued softly, not just with his accusation, with the way he didn't protect your heart, with the way he let everyone else's opinions shape how he saw you. Her eyes watered before she could blink them away. She whispered, Why do you see things so clearly? I've been where you are, he said. You can't rush healing. And you can't go back to someone who broke the parts of you you're trying to rebuild. The room felt quiet, but unlike the silence that weighed on her earlier, this one felt like space, breathable, steady, grounding. Cicely wiped her eyes and nodded. I'm trying. Trying is enough, he said. A soft tension formed in the air, not romantic but vulnerable, a closeness built from shared truth rather than desire. It wasn't time for anything more than that. She wasn't whole yet, and William knew it. He didn't try to fill the silence with promises or pretend to be her rescue. He was simply present. And sometimes, presence is the beginning of healing. After a few moments, he stepped back toward the door. I'll let you rest. But remember, you're not rebuilding alone. Her gaze softened. Thank you, William. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. You don't owe him your pain, Cicely. Not anymore. Then he left, the door closing gently behind him. Cicely sat still for a moment, letting the quiet wrap around her like a blanket. She reached for her phone again, her thumb hovering over the voicemail icon, but she didn't press play. She powered the phone off completely. She wasn't ready to hear David's voice. Instead, she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling something unexpected, the beginning of peace. Not happiness, not closure, but the first tiny breath of peace after a storm that tore through her life. She inhaled slowly. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the need for work, stability, the long road of rebuilding her self-worth. But for now, tonight, she allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Somewhere deep inside, She could feel the smallest spark of something she didn't dare name yet, a calm flicker sparked by William's steady presence and the space he gave her to feel human again. And sometimes, pausing is its own kind of progress. If you believe she deserves better, comment new beginnings. David hadn't slept. The moment Cicely walked out of his mansion with 2 suitcases and a look he couldn't unsee, something in him cracked open, something he didn't know how to name, something he didn't have the emotional vocabulary to confront. But he felt it. He felt it in the silence of the house, in the empty side of the bed, in the echo of her laughter that used to soften the hard edges of his world. And now, the house felt wrong. Not quiet, not peaceful, just wrong. He sat in his office long after midnight, staring at the last message he sent her. A simple, weak "please call me." It wasn't enough. It couldn't be enough. But it was all he could manage when fear, regret, and shame collided inside him. At dawn, unable to take another minute of waiting, he left the mansion and drove into the city. He didn't know where she would go. He didn't know who she would trust. He didn't know what she needed. All he knew was this. He had pushed her away because he let other people paint a false picture of the woman he promised to protect. As he crossed into Baltimore, the city glowed with early sunlight. Cars passed, buses rumbled, people hurried to work, the rhythm of everyday life moving forward while his own world felt like it was standing still. David gripped the steering wheel harder. He replayed the moment he confronted her, the way her smile faltered, the shock in her eyes, the silence that fell between them. Not loud, not angry, but a silence that held years of disappointment he didn't know she had been collecting. He thought confronting her would bring clarity. Instead, it revealed a truth he wasn't prepared for. His insecurities had been louder than her love. As he drove through the neighborhood she used to mention, stories from childhood, places she grew up, corners she said shaped her, he wondered how he had missed everything that made her strong. He passed a familiar block near the inner harbor, the place where she liked to sit on weekends when she wanted fresh air. He slowed the car, scanning benches, sidewalks, bus stops. Nothing. He kept going. He circled downtown, then midtown, then the neighborhoods she once took him to when they were dating, the loud, lively, loving communities he never fully understood. Still nothing. His chest tightened. He parked near Lexington Market and stepped out, adjusting his coat against the chill. Crowds moved in every direction, but no face belonged to her. He asked around. "Have you seen a woman named Cicely?" Descriptions, photos on his phone, hoping someone, anyone, had seen her. Most shook their heads. A few shrugged. Some didn't bother answering. David kept searching. His mind drifted back to their early days, the days when Cicely challenged him, grounded him, asked him real questions no one else dared to ask. He remembered their first argument. She told him, "If you let fear decide how you love, you'll never really love." Back then, he admired her strength. Later, he feared it. He feared that she saw too much. He feared she could read the insecurities he hid behind success. He feared being unworthy of her love, so he clung to the one thing he understood: control. That fear poisoned him, and now he was walking through Baltimore like a man chasing the pieces of a life he shattered with his own hands. At a bus stop bench, he paused. The seat looked recently used, the faint imprint of someone sitting, a soft smudge where luggage might have rested. He closed his eyes. Was she here? Did she wait here? Did she cry here? Was she cold, hungry, alone? The thought tore through him. He sat down on the bench, elbows resting on his knees, head dropping into his hands. For the first time in years, maybe in his entire adult life, his strength, his money, his power meant nothing. He whispered into his palms, "What have I done?" Memories collided inside him. Cicely teaching him how to laugh at himself. Cicely telling him his suits all looked the same. And then, the lies. The whispers from relatives who judged her without knowing her. The insinuations that she wasn't fit for his world. The rumor, the lie, that she had married him for financial security. He let those doubts grow. He nurtured them. Until the day he confronted her like she was a stranger. David stood abruptly, unable to sit still a second longer. His heart raced as he checked his phone again. No texts, no calls, nothing from her. He paced near the bench, pulling at his coat nervously. "Where are you, Cicely?" he whispered. He wasn't someone who begged. He wasn't someone who chased. He wasn't someone who admitted he was wrong. But today, none of those rules mattered. He walked toward a small cafe they used to visit. Cicely loved the pastries there, always choosing the same one and then stealing a bite of his, even after saying she didn't want her own. He stepped inside. The barista looked up. "Good morning. What can I get you?" He ignored the question. "Have you seen this woman?" He held out his phone. The barista studied the photo, then shook her head. "Sorry. Are you sure?" David pressed. "I'm sure." He left quickly, frustration building. He circled more streets, more bus stops, more areas she might have passed through. He talked to strangers who had no attachment to him and no reason to care. Still nothing. As afternoon approached, he found himself near the Federal Hill area. The sunlight glimmered on the water, cold wind brushing past his shoulders. He stared across the harbor, feeling the weight of failure settling deeper into his chest. He finally understood something painful. He didn't lose Cicely in one moment. He lost her slowly, piece by piece. Every time he chose doubt over trust, every time he chose silence over communication, every time he chose his family's approval over her emotional safety. This wasn't a sudden collapse, it was erosion. And now he was standing in the ruins. His phone vibrated in his pocket. His pulse quickened, hoping it was her. It wasn't. A friend sent him a message asking about business meetings he had missed. He didn't reply. Work didn't matter today. Nothing mattered except finding her. Not to drag her home, not to demand answers, but to finally say the words he should have said long before things fell apart. "I'm sorry." He leaned against a railing overlooking the harbor and closed his eyes. He pictured her smile, her voice, the warmth she brought into rooms simply by entering. He pictured the way she used to touch his arm when she wanted his attention, soft, patient, loving. He had taken all of it for granted. Then a sudden thought struck him hard. Hotel rooms. If she had nowhere else to go, she might be staying somewhere affordable, somewhere temporary. He pushed away from the railing and hurried toward his car. His heart pounded with new urgency. He began checking every hotel within a mile radius, showing photos, asking questions, hoping for even the smallest clue. By sunset, he had visited 6. At the 7th, he walked in with sagging shoulders. He approached the front desk, holding his phone in hand. "Excuse me," he said to the clerk. "I'm trying to find someone." He showed Cicely's photo. The clerk hesitated. David's heart stopped. "She was here?" he asked. The clerk didn't confirm, didn't deny, just said, "I can't give out guest information." David exhaled shakily. She was close, close enough that he could feel it. He stepped outside and looked around. Somewhere in this part of the city, Cicely was starting over, breathing without him. And for the first time in his life, the thought of not being part of her world terrified him more than anything money could fix. He whispered into the fading daylight, "Please, let me find her before it's too late." The hotel room felt less heavy the next morning, not bright, not cheerful, just lighter, as if the weight on Cicely's chest had eased a fraction overnight. She sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the quiet hum of the heater, gathering herself for another day she wasn't yet sure how to navigate. A soft knock tapped at the door. Not urgent, not intrusive, just gentle, familiar. "Cicely?" William's voice carried through the wood, steady as always. "Only if you're awake." She stood and opened the door. He wasn't holding breakfast this time, just a small paper bag and a warm expression that softened when he saw her. "You look like you slept a little better," he said. "A little," she admitted. He held out the bag. "Tea. The same one you liked yesterday. I figured a familiar taste helps." Her fingers brushed the bag when she took it. The kindness in that one small gesture settled into her chest in a way she wasn't prepared for. "Thank you, William. You don't have to thank me each time," he replied gently. "Helping you isn't an effort." She stepped back, and he walked inside with his usual quiet presence. He didn't scan the room. He didn't judge the suitcases or the disarray of her thoughts. He stood near the window, hands in his pockets, as if letting her decide the pace of every moment. They stayed in the calm silence for a minute before Cicely sighed softly. "Yesterday was harder than I expected." He nodded. "Starting over usually is." She looked at him closely, his relaxed shoulders, the tiredness in his eyes that didn't dull his warmth. "You talk like someone who's done this before." His gaze shifted to the floor. "In a way I have." William exhaled slowly, and when he raised his eyes to hers, there was a flicker of vulnerability she hadn't seen before. You remember what I told you about hearing your words at the coffee shop? She nodded. You said my advice helped you make a decision. He took a seat in the chair by the window. It did, more than you realize. Cicely sat on the edge of the bed, facing him, surprised by how open he suddenly seemed. He continued, voice low but steady. I was in a relationship for years, a long one, not healthy, not supportive. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, just draining. The kind of slow drain where you don't realize how much of yourself you've lost until one day there's almost nothing left. Cicely swallowed gently, recognizing the pain behind those words. What happened? William looked out the window for a moment, his jaw tightening slightly. I stayed too long. I kept hoping things would get better. I kept trying to fix us. But the problem wasn't us. It was that I was trying alone. Those last words hit her deeply, too deeply, because she knew that feeling. She lived that feeling. He went on, she made me feel like I wasn't enough, like everything I brought to the table needed to be more money, more attention, more perfection. But the one thing she never brought was understanding. His shoulders dropped. I stopped recognizing myself. Cicely felt her heart tug in empathy. Why didn't you leave sooner? He let out a quiet, humorless breath. Because people like us, we stay for hope, even when hope has stopped staying for us. Her eyes softened. So the day in the coffee shop, that was the day I realized I couldn't stay anymore, he said. Hearing you tell that woman that love shouldn't make you lose yourself. It was the first time in years someone said something that made sense. It felt like someone finally put words to the truth I'd been avoiding. Cicely blinked, absorbing that. So you left because of what I said? She asked softly. In part, he admitted. You didn't tell me what to do. You reminded me what I had forgotten, that my life still belonged to me. She inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his confession. She didn't know she had carried that kind of impact. She didn't know her simple act of kindness had rippled far deeper than she imagined. And after you left? She asked carefully. William tilted his head slightly, his expression layering with something complex, relief mixed with lingering hurt. It took time, longer than I like to admit, but I'm better. Healing doesn't move in straight lines, it loops, dips, climbs, but I'm better. His eyes met hers with gentle honesty. And helping you now, it isn't charity, it isn't pity. It's gratitude, Cicely. You showed me a truth I needed. I'm just returning what was given. Emotion tightened her throat. She didn't expect to feel such warmth settle inside her, didn't expect her eyes to sting with tears she hadn't meant to release. She whispered, I didn't know I mattered that much. You mattered, he said firmly, to someone you didn't even know, and that says more about who you are than anything your past has tried to define you by. She looked down, blinking away the moisture on her lashes. William leaned forward slightly. And you're not weak for hurting. You were loyal. You were committed. You gave love in a way not everyone knows how to receive. Her breath caught. She hadn't realized until this moment how much she needed someone to acknowledge that, not as a sympathy line, not as an apology for David, but as a truth about her character. He didn't replace her pain. He recognized it. A slow, warm silence filled the room. The kind that didn't ask anything from her, didn't pressure her into responding, didn't expect her to be healed. It simply existed with her. After a moment, William rose from the chair. I'm heading out for a few hours, running errands. If you need anything, just call me, or text, or knock on the car window. I'll be nearby. You don't have to stay close, she said gently. I know, he replied. But I want to. She looked at him, really looked at him. The calm steadiness in his stance, the quiet strength in his presence, the absence of any agenda. He wasn't filling a void. He wasn't forcing a connection. He was simply offering space for her to breathe, and for the first time in a long time, she felt safe in someone's nearness. As William reached the door, he paused. You know, when I left my relationship, I spent weeks thinking I'd never trust anyone again. And then yesterday, hearing you talk about your past, it reminded me that connection isn't gone. It just needs the right soil. Her breath softened. I don't know if I'm ready for any kind of connection. That's okay, he said. I'm not here to rush you. I'm here to walk at your pace. Those words lingered long after he stepped into the hallway. Cicely closed the door slowly and leaned against it, her heart beating with a calm she didn't know she could still feel. William wasn't trying to replace David. He wasn't trying to be anything more than steady ground during a time she couldn't stand on her own. But the warmth he brought, gentle, steady, patient, was beginning to settle into her life like the softest start of something she couldn't yet name. And she didn't have to name it. Not now. Healing doesn't rush, and neither did he. The afternoon light slanted softly through the hotel window, casting long shapes across the carpet as Cicely stood quietly by the bed, trying to steady her breath. William had left only 20 minutes earlier, yet his presence still lingered in the room, not as a weight but as grounding calm. His words replayed in her mind. "I'm not here to rush you. I'm here to walk at your pace." She pressed her fingertips against her temples, appreciating the peace, while also fearing how fragile it still was. Healing felt like learning to breathe again after months underwater, natural but painful. Her phone, lying face down on the bed, buzzed twice. She ignored it. She didn't want to break the calm by letting David's voice in. She wasn't ready. Not after everything he tore down. Not after spending so long trying to love someone who never saw her clearly. She paced slowly toward the window, glancing at the city below. People walking, buses turning corners, life continuing whether or not she was keeping up. Then, a knock at the door, a firm one. Not like William's light, respectful tap. This was heavier, familiar. A sound that made her stomach drop before her mind even caught up. Her heart slammed once against her ribs. No, she whispered to herself. It can't be. Another knock. Louder. "Cicely?" a voice called from the hallway. Her knees weakened. She knew that voice. David. She turned away from the door instantly, breath catching in her throat. Her hands trembled. She took a step back, then another, as if distance alone could shield her from everything she wasn't ready to face. He knocked again, not with anger, but desperation. "Cicely, please, open the door." She closed her eyes. Not when she barely pieced herself together. The door knock repeated, softer this time. "I know you're in there." Her pulse quickened. How did he find her? Who told him? How close had he been searching? The questions fired through her mind, but her feet remained frozen to the floor. Another knock, a breath of silence. Then, "Please, just give me a moment." David's voice broke in a way she never heard before. Her throat tightened. Tears pricked her eyes out of nowhere, not from longing, but from the ache of being forced back into a past she wasn't ready to confront. A soft voice behind her said, "Cicely." She spun around. William stood a few steps inside the doorway to the hallway, calm, steady, not surprised. He must have seen David arriving as he walked back inside the building. "How?" she whispered. "I saw him on my way in," William said gently. He looked lost and determined. Her breaths grew uneven. "I can't do this right now. You don't have to." William stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "But he's not leaving until he says what he came to say." Cicely backed up until she nearly touched the wall. "I'm not strong enough for this." "Yes, you are," William said softly, "and you don't have to face it alone." Another knock. This time she exhaled and stepped toward the door, not out of desire but out of readiness. William stayed to the side, quietly present, not trying to replace anything, not trying to defend her, simply there as steady ground. Cicely opened the door. David stood there, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked undone. His hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion, his expression fractured with regret he could no longer mask. The controlled, polished man she had been married to was gone, replaced by someone shaken enough to finally admit what he had lost. When he saw her, his breath left his body in a trembling exhale. Cicely. Her name left his lips like it cut him. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could say. David swallowed hard, glancing once at William, then back at her. "I'm not here to fight or demand anything. I had to see you." Cicely kept her voice steady. "Why?" "Because I ruined everything," he whispered. "Because I believed lies instead of believing you. Because I let people twist my thoughts until I couldn't see the woman who stood right in front of me." Her throat tightened. He stepped forward slightly, but not enough to cross her boundary. "I've been searching the entire city for you. I didn't know if you were safe. I didn't know if you were okay. I just knew that I needed to find you, even if you never wanted to speak to me again." Cicely didn't respond. She kept her eyes on him, the storm inside her swirling but not spilling. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I'm sorry for doubting you. I'm sorry for letting my insecurity destroy what we built. I'm sorry I didn't defend you against my family. I'm sorry for everything." His chest rose and fell unsteadily. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added, "but I needed you to hear it." A long pause filled the space between them. Cicely's voice trembled when she finally spoke. "Do you know what it feels like to love someone who always kept you one step away from trust?" David closed his eyes. "Do you know what it feels like to sleep next to someone and still feel alone?" He nodded painfully. "Do you know what it feels like," her voice broke, "to walk out of a marriage and end up on a sidewalk with nothing but 2 suitcases because the man you trusted didn't trust you?" David's face collapsed into guilt she had never seen him show before. Tears finally fell from her eyes, not for the past, not for him, but for everything she carried alone. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," she said quietly. "I left because staying meant losing myself." David's shoulders sagged in defeat. "I know," he whispered. "And now you want to fix something that wasn't broken in one moment," she continued, "but broken slowly. Every time you chose fear over faith in me." William remained still to the side, supportive but silent, not inserting himself. David took a careful breath. "I'm not here to take you home. I'm not here to claim anything. I just want another chance to earn your trust again, even if it takes years." Cicely looked down. Her heart wasn't hardened. It was tired, so tired. She shook her head softly. "I can't go back with you," David inhaled sharply, but he didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply nodded, tears gathering in his eyes. "I understand." Cicely lifted her gaze again. "I'm healing, and I need space to do that. Space you didn't give me when we were together." Her voice softened. "This isn't goodbye forever, but it is goodbye for now." David's chest tightened visibly, but he stepped back, slowly, respectfully. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll give you space. Just please be safe." Cicely nodded once. David glanced at William but said nothing. William offered a small, respectful nod, not territorial, not defensive, just acknowledging the moment. David turned and walked down the hallway, each step heavy with the truth of consequences he couldn't undo. When the elevator doors closed behind him, Cicely exhaled shakily and leaned into the wall. Tears poured quietly, not from sadness or anger but from release, the emotional breaking she'd held in for far too long. William stepped closer but didn't touch her. "Breathe," he whispered, and she did. For the first time, freely. "Who do you think truly values her, David or William?" Comment below. Cicely woke the next morning with a quiet sense of clarity humming beneath her ribs. She wasn't healed, not even close, but something inside her had shifted overnight. Maybe it was facing David without collapsing. Maybe it was the way William stood beside her, not demanding anything, not steering her decisions, just offering steady ground. Or maybe it was simply the reality that she had survived another day. For the first time since leaving the mansion, she didn't wake up feeling like she was falling. She sat on the edge of the bed, looking at her suitcases, the same ones that once felt like symbols of shame, reminders of everything she lost. Today, they felt different. Not joyful, not triumphant, but lighter. They weren't symbols of being discarded anymore. They were symbols of what she carried forward. She got dressed, took a breath, and stepped outside the room. In the hallway, she found William leaning against the wall, sipping from a cup of tea. He wasn't hovering. He wasn't checking in every 2 minutes like she was fragile. He was simply there. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied. "You ready for today?" She nodded with a steadiness she didn't realize she had. "I think I am." They headed out into the crisp Baltimore morning. The sun was gentle, not harsh, warming the rooftops of the row houses as cars rolled lazily down the street. "Where to first?" Cicely asked as they reached his SUV. "I made a couple calls," William said, opening the door for her. "There's a small community center near Holland's Market looking for temporary help. Administrative work, organizing programs, greeting people. Nothing exhausting but meaningful." Cicely blinked. "You did that for me?" He shrugged lightly. "I figured it wouldn't hurt to ask around, and Baltimore has a way of helping its own." She smiled, not wide but real. Thank you." The drive was filled with easy quiet, not heavy, not tense, just peaceful. When they reached the community center, Cicely felt a tug of familiarity. The building wasn't fancy, but it radiated warmth in a way luxury spaces never could. Inside, an older woman at the front desk welcomed them with a broad smile. "You hear about the helper position?" "Yes," Cicely said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I can start immediately." "Well, that's what I like to hear," the woman replied. "We're short-handed and need someone with heart." Cicely wasn't sure she had heart to offer, not yet, but she knew she had effort, and effort was a start. The woman gave her a brief rundown, sorting files, checking in visitors, assisting with event setups, answering phone calls. Nothing complicated, nothing overwhelming. Cicely accepted instantly. As she filled out the intake form, William waited near the entrance. She looked back at him once, catching his eye. He nodded, a small, quiet affirmation that said, "I told you you'd find your footing." The first few hours passed with surprising ease. Cicely organized donation forms, labeled storage bins, arranged chairs for an afternoon program. The tasks weren't glamorous, but they were hers to complete, hers to own, hers to take pride in. As she worked, a young volunteer approached her. "You're new?" "Yes," Cicely answered. "Well, welcome. We appreciate the help. No judgment, no assumptions, just kindness." She hadn't felt that in a long time. During her lunch break, she walked outside and sat on the steps of the row-house-lined street. Kids rode bikes through the sidewalk cracks. A neighbor across the street called out to someone about bringing extra plates for Sunday dinner. A man walking his dog nodded at her like she belonged there. Cicely inhaled deeply, letting Baltimore settle into her lungs the way it hadn't in years. This was home, not the mansion, not the penthouse parties, not the stiff, polite smiles. This energy, this noise, this warmth, was the place that raised her. Her phone buzzed. A text from the church secretary at Mount Calvary. "Saw you were back in the neighborhood. If you ever want to visit, the doors are open." She almost cried at the simple grace of it. Later that afternoon, she stepped inside that very church, the one she had grown up in, the one whose wooden pews held decades of whispered prayers and Sunday joy. The stained windows cast colorful patches of light across the floor. Reverend Thompson passed her in the aisle and paused. "Well, look who God brought home," he said warmly. Cicely smiled weakly. "I just needed a quiet moment." "You can have as many as you need," he replied. No questions, no judgment, no reminders of where she had been. Just space, the one thing she'd been deprived of for so long. She sat in a pew, hands folded in her lap, breathing through the hum of old church pipes. She didn't pray out loud. She didn't know what to ask for, but she felt something open inside her, a memory of who she used to be before she became a reflection of David's expectations. She stayed only 20 minutes, but when she left, her shoulders felt lighter. When she returned to the community center, a small, unexpected joy hit her. She was excited to work. Not because the tasks were thrilling, but because she felt useful again. She felt like she existed outside the shadow of someone else's doubts. By the time William came to pick her up, she had completed a full shift. He stepped inside the lobby to meet her. "How was it?" he asked. Cicely smiled, genuinely this time. "Good. Better than I expected. You look lighter," he observed. "I feel lighter," she admitted. They walked out together as the sky began to soften into late afternoon gold. The breeze brushed against her face, lifting the strands of hair at her jawline. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she felt wind as something refreshing instead of cold. "I think I remembered a piece of myself today," she said quietly. William glanced at her with a warmth that didn't press, didn't claim, didn't ask for anything in return. "Good. You deserve to." As they reached the SUV, she paused thoughtfully. "I want to save money. I want to get my own place." "That's a solid goal," William said. "And you'll get there." She looked at him, the quiet confidence in his expression giving her something she hadn't felt in months. Belief in her own strength. "Today felt like the first step," she said. "It was," he replied. "And tomorrow will be another." For the first time since her marriage ended, Cicely didn't feel defined by what she had lost. She felt defined by what she was rebuilding, herself. The evening air settled over Baltimore with a calm that felt almost symbolic, like the city itself was exhaling after a long day. Cicely stepped out of the community center with her tote bag slung over her shoulder, feeling the pleasant ache of a day spent working, contributing, and existing outside anyone's shadow. The city lights glowed softly as she breathed in the familiar scent of street food, faint exhaust, and warming sidewalks. For once, the world didn't feel heavy. She walked toward the SUV parked near the corner, expecting to see William leaning against it like he usually did. But he wasn't there. The driver's seat was empty. The street around her was quiet. Before she could wonder where he was, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby row house. Her breath stilled. David. He didn't rush toward her. He didn't speak immediately. He simply stood under the streetlight with his hands in his coat pockets, shoulders tense, eyes carrying the weight of sleepless nights. Cicely froze, her pulse quickening not from fear, but from the emotional collision she wasn't prepared to revisit. David took a hesitant step forward. "I'm not here to overwhelm you," he said quietly. "I just needed to see you one last time." Cicely steadied herself, fingers tightening around the strap of her tote bag. "How did you find me?" He swallowed. "I went to the hotel. The clerk still wouldn't tell me anything, but someone outside mentioned seeing you leave this morning with a volunteer shirt. I followed the trail." She inhaled slowly. "David, you can't keep searching for me. I'm not here to drag you back," he said, voice thin with exhaustion. "I'm here because there's something you need to know, something I should have told you months ago." A single car passed in the distance, its headlights briefly illuminating the tension between them. Cicely crossed her arms defensively. "Say what you came to say." David nodded, his jaw tightening. "It was my cousin," he whispered. "She's the one who started the lie." Cicely's stomach dropped, but she didn't move. "She told me," he continued, "that she overheard you bragging at a party, saying you'd finally secured a future by marrying me, that you planned everything, that you wanted access, not love." Cicely's eyes narrowed, hurt rising like an old bruise resurfacing. "You believed that?" David shut his eyes briefly. "Not right away. But I let the doubt in, and once it was there, I kept feeding it." She stepped back, soft disbelief shaking through her. "After everything we built, after everything I poured into that marriage, you let someone else's insecurity define who you thought I was." He didn't defend himself. He didn't even raise his voice. Yes, the honesty in that small word cut deeper than any argument possibly could. Cicely looked away, trying to steady her breathing. The streetlight flickered gently above them, washing both of their faces in uneven light. "Why would she lie?" Cicely finally asked. David let out a bitter exhale. "Because she never thought you fit our world. Because she thought I should marry someone with money, someone who made sense on paper. Because she resented that I chose you." Cicely's jaw clenched. "And instead of defending you," David said, "instead of shutting her down, instead of trusting the woman I loved, I let her words worm their way into every corner of my mind." He took a shaky step closer. "That's the truth. All of it." Silence wrapped around them like a tight band. Cicely finally spoke. "Do you know what that did to me? Being judged for things I never did, having intentions assigned to me that weren't mine." Her voice trembled with restrained emotion. "Do you know what it feels like to love someone who keeps measuring you against expectations you never asked to meet?" David's breath hitched. "I know now." She shook her head slowly. "No, you're just feeling regret. That's not the same thing as understanding." He looked down, the shame visibly weighing him down. "I don't expect you to forgive me today," he said. "I don't expect you to ever come back. But I couldn't move forward without taking responsibility for what I destroyed." Her eyes softened despite the pain. "I never wanted to be your perfect partner. I just wanted to be seen." "I see you now," he whispered. Cicely's lips pressed into a thin line. "You see the loss now, not me. Not the woman who tried to love you even when you doubted her." David inhaled sharply but didn't argue, because she was right. A cold breeze swept through the quiet street, brushing along Cicely's cheeks. She closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself before speaking again. "You hurt me, David, not just with your words, but by letting me defend myself against lies that shouldn't have had a home in your heart." He nodded painfully. I know, and I can't undo it. All I can do is offer you the truth and let you choose what to do with it. Cicely dropped her arms from her chest, not in surrender, but in clarity. I forgive you, she said quietly. David's eyes glistened. You do? Yes, she replied, because forgiveness is for my peace, not your outcome. He exhaled a breath he had been holding, but the relief didn't reach his shoulders. It didn't bring back what was broken, but, she added, voice steady, I'm not returning to the place where I disappeared. David's face fell, not in anger, not in disbelief, but in acceptance. She continued, I'm finding myself again, I'm rebuilding, and I need distance to protect that process. He nodded slowly, tears slipping down his face. I won't bother you again. I won't chase you. I won't force anything. I just needed to say everything I kept inside. Cicely stepped forward slightly, not to close the distance, but to offer sincerity. Someday you'll build something better in yourself, something that doesn't rely on other people's whispers, but that lesson isn't mine to teach anymore. David swallowed, trying to steady his composure. Thank you for giving me the chance to say this. She nodded once. At that moment, a familiar SUV turned the corner and pulled up to the curb. William. He stepped out with calm awareness, taking in the scene without judgment. He didn't glare. He didn't insert himself. He respected the gravity of what he walked into. David looked at William, then back at Cicely. This is where I leave, he murmured. Cicely didn't respond. David stepped backward, tears still visible, but relief threaded through his expression, the relief of closure, even painful closure. Goodbye, Cicely, he whispered. She whispered back, Goodbye. He turned and walked away slowly, disappearing into the dimming Baltimore evening. Cicely stood still until he vanished completely. Her chest trembled, not from wanting him back, but from letting go of something she carried too long. William approached gently. Are you okay? She nodded. I think this time I really am. He didn't touch her. He didn't push. He simply stood beside her, letting the moment sit in its truth, because healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet decision whispered into the evening. I choose myself. The night breeze brushed softly against Cicely's cheeks as David disappeared down the quiet Baltimore street. She stood completely still, the weight of the moment sinking into her bones, not heavy like before, but cleansing. For the first time in a long time, the ache inside her wasn't tied to shame or loss. It was the ache of release, the ache of finally putting something down that had been too heavy to carry. She drew a breath, steady and full. William didn't speak right away. He didn't tell her she did the right thing. He didn't step closer or try to fill the silence. He simply waited. He always waited, allowing her space, allowing her pace, allowing her truth. After a long, quiet moment, Cicely turned toward him. The streetlight reflected faintly in his eyes, highlighting the same calm steadiness she'd grown used to. You okay? He asked softly. She nodded as she exhaled. I didn't realize how much I needed that conversation until it happened. Closure does that, he said. It doesn't always show up when we're ready for it. But when it arrives, it frees something. She rubbed her arms lightly, grounding herself. I feel lighter. William offered the faintest smile. Good. He didn't push for her to explain. He didn't ask if she wanted to talk more. He simply walked around the car and opened the passenger door for her. Let's get you home, he said. Home. She didn't flinch at the word. She didn't correct him. And that alone told her how far she'd come. When they arrived back at the hotel, Cicely entered the room and sank onto the bed, not exhausted, but thoughtful. William stayed near the doorway, not wanting to invade the space unless invited. You can sit, she said after a moment, gesturing to the chair near the window. He nodded and stepped in, settling comfortably without taking over the room. Cicely looked at him, her expression reflective. I didn't expect him to be so honest. People facing loss often find clarity, William replied. She studied his face. Is that what happened with you? When you heard me in the coffee shop? A flicker of vulnerability crossed his eyes, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a quiet truth rising to the surface. That day, he said, leaning back slightly, I was sitting there replaying my own mistakes, my own heartbreak. He paused, choosing his words carefully. You were talking to someone about giving yourself permission to walk away from the version of yourself that made someone else comfortable. About not shrinking who you are just to be tolerated. Cicely remembered saying that. She'd been comforting a stranger, not knowing her words were reaching someone else entirely. That hit me, William said, because I had spent years fitting myself into someone else's expectations. And hearing you, a woman who spoke with such certainty and softness, it reminded me I could reclaim my life too. Cicely lowered her gaze, touched in a way that reached deeper than she expected. I wasn't certain, she admitted quietly. I was just trying to sound strong for someone else. He shook his head softly. Even when you're unsure, your heart speaks in a way people feel. Cicely swallowed gently. I didn't know anyone was listening. I was, he said. And you changed something in me that day. Not because you meant to, but because your honesty had weight. She looked out the window, the city lights blinking like distant reminders of all the stories unfolding tonight. I spent so long believing my voice didn't matter, she said gently, that I had to shrink myself to be loved. William's tone softened. You don't have to shrink here. Her chest warmed in a way that didn't feel overwhelming. Just real, human, present. The next day, Cicely returned to the community center for another shift. Her steps were steadier, her focus clearer. She sorted donation bags, answered calls, and greeted visitors with a newfound ease. The staff thanked her repeatedly, genuinely grateful for her presence. Later that afternoon, a group of neighborhood kids stopped by to practice for a small talent showcase. Musical notes drifted through the hall as one of the girls practiced singing. Cicely paused to listen, her heart tugging at the sound of someone finding courage. It mirrored her own journey, a soft voice learning to rise again. When her shift ended, William arrived as usual. He stepped inside, scanning her expression instinctively. How was today? He asked. Cicely smiled, a soft, earned smile. Good. I think I'm beginning to reconnect with myself. That's the best kind of progress, he replied. They walked outside together. The sunset painted the sky in warm orange and purple strokes above the row houses. The air smelled faintly of grilled food from a nearby vendor. You hungry? William asked. A little, she admitted. Then let's grab something simple, he said. There's a spot a block from here that makes good chicken sandwiches. She raised an eyebrow. Since when do you know all the food spots in Baltimore? He laughed quietly. Since I started driving around this city every day dropping you off. She blinked, touched again. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, he said, and nothing in his voice hinted at pressure or expectation. It was a statement of presence, not pursuit. They walked together to the small corner shop, ordered their food, and sat at a table by the window. The meal wasn't fancy. No linen napkins, no curated playlists, just warm food in a cozy, crowded space where everyday people came to breathe between life's long hours. Cicely loved it. It felt honest. They talked about simple things. The community center, the noise of the city, a funny moment from her shift, the way Baltimore traffic always seemed to conspire against peaceful driving. William shared bits of his own healing journey, never painting himself as a hero, never centering his pain over hers. He spoke like someone walking beside her, not in front of her. Later that night, as he drove her back to the hotel, Cicely watched the passing streetlights blur softly against the window. William, she said, after a long pause. Yes? I don't know where I'm going yet. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't want to jump into anything before I'm whole again. His hands relaxed on the steering wheel. I don't want you to rush, he replied. Healing isn't a race, and your heart deserves time, not pressure. She looked at him, struck by the sincerity in his tone. You're not waiting for me, are you? She asked carefully. He met her gaze without flinching. I'm standing beside you, that's different. Her breath hitched in a quiet, emotional way. He continued, If you choose to build a future where I'm part of it, I'll be grateful. If your healing leads you somewhere else, I'll still be grateful I got to witness even a part of your strength. Cicely felt something inside her soften, not like falling, but like unfolding. Thank you, she whispered. He shook his head gently. Don't thank me. You're the one doing the work. When they reached the hotel, he walked her to the entrance but didn't follow her inside. He paused a few steps back, giving her full control of the moment. Good night, Cicely, he said. She turned to face him fully. Good night, William. Their eyes held for a moment, warm, calm, steady, before she stepped inside. As the door closed behind her, Cicely leaned against it and exhaled. For the first time since everything fell apart, she felt a future forming, not shaped by someone else's doubt or expectations, but by a quiet, growing confidence inside herself. And somewhere in that future, gently waiting, without pressure or demand, was William, not as a savior, not as a replacement, but as someone offering space where she could bloom slowly, fully, and freely. The key was small, worn around the edges, and attached to a flimsy paper tag with the unit number scribbled in blue ink. But when Cicely held it in her palm, it felt heavier than anything she'd carried in months, not because of weight, but because of meaning. This was hers, not a room she tiptoed through while trying not to disturb anyone. A place with a door she could lock, and finally exhale behind. She stood in the middle of the empty apartment, letting the quiet settle over her. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't polished with marble or filled with untouched appliances. The hardwood had scratches, the walls carried marks from previous tenants, and the kitchen window took effort to nudge open. But to Cicely, it was perfect. The sunlight warmed the living room floor, pouring in through a wide window that overlooked a modest Baltimore street. She imagined how the space would transform with time. A small thrifted couch, a rug with personality, maybe a plant that could survive her uneven watering habits. Most importantly, she imagined herself here, not as someone abandoned or judged, but as someone rebuilding. She placed her palms on the window frame, grounding herself. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." A soft knock at the open door made her smile. She didn't have to guess who it was. "Am I too early?" William asked from the hallway, holding a grocery bag like a man unsure if he'd brought the right offering. "No," Cicely said, waving him in. "You're right on time." She stepped aside, letting him enter the apartment that still smelled like fresh paint. William scanned the room slowly, his face warm, not pitying. He wasn't seeing an empty place. He was seeing her beginning. "It fits you," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Fits me how?" "It feels like a space that's waiting for stories. Yours, not someone else's expectations." Cicely couldn't help smiling. "You always know how to make things sound peaceful." He shrugged lightly. "I've had a lot of practice, calming my own storms." Her laughter filled the space, bouncing off bare walls and giving the apartment its first sound of life. "What's in the bag?" she asked. William lifted it a little. "Groceries. You said dinner, but I figured we could cook something simple together." Cicely blinked, surprised and touched. "Together? Unless you want me to step back and let you take full control of the kitchen." "Oh no," she said quickly. "You're helping. I cannot burn my first dinner in my first apartment." The two of them moved toward the small kitchen, which held exactly 2 cabinets, 1 wobbly drawer, and a countertop that had seen better decades. But with them in it, it felt warm. William unpacked items, 2 chicken breasts, seasoning, a bag of fresh spinach, garlic, pasta, and a loaf of bread. "You planned an entire meal," Cicely teased. "Trust me," he said. "This is the simplest recipe I know. If I can make it, anyone can." She laughed again, a real laugh, full and unguarded. "I needed that." "You deserve that," he replied. They cooked side by side in a rhythm that felt unforced and familiar. Cicely minced garlic while William seasoned the chicken. At one point, the drawer fell off the track when she tried to pull out a spoon, and they both burst into laughter as she struggled to reattach it. "This place has personality," William joked. "It has charm," she corrected. "It has structural challenges," he added. She nudged him with her shoulder. "Don't ruin my moment." The kitchen filled with the scent of garlic and warm bread. The steam from the pasta fogged up the small window, and for a moment Cicely imagined herself in every new chapter this place would hold, quiet mornings, late-night reflections, and moments just like this, shared with someone who didn't rush her heart. When they finally sat at the small fold-out table she had thrifted earlier that day, Cicely clasped her hands together. "To new beginnings," she said. William lifted his glass of water. "To the strength that got you here." Her breath caught unexpectedly. People had praised her for accomplishments before, but no one had praised her resilience. They ate, talked about the day, laughed about the broken drawer, and shared moments that filled the room with a gentle warmth that made the apartment feel lived in already. At one point, Cicely looked around her new home, then back at William, and felt something settle peacefully inside her. Not love yet, not something rushed, but trust. A trust with roots, not urgency. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For dinner?" he asked playfully. "For being here," she clarified softly. "Not to rescue me. Not to take over my life, just to stand with me. William held her gaze for a moment. Standing with someone is a privilege, Cicely, not a duty. Her throat tightened in an emotional way she didn't expect. After dinner, William helped her clean up, only because she allowed it, and then walked with her to the apartment door. The hallway light flickered above them, giving off a warm glow that felt more nostalgic than annoying. "Are you staying here tonight?" he asked gently. "I am," she said, and she felt proud saying it. "It'll be my first night on my own in a long time." He nodded. "You deserve to feel safe in your own space." She leaned the side of her head against the doorframe. "And you?" "I'll head home," he said. "But if you need anything, even if it's just someone to talk to if the quiet feels strange, call me." She smiled. "I will." He took a step back. Not close enough to create pressure, not far enough to feel distant. "Good night, Cicely." "Good night, William." As he turned to walk away, she called softly, "Hey, William." He paused, glancing back. "Thank you for being part of my beginning, not my recovery." His smile carried warmth and calm certainty. "You're not in recovery anymore, Cicely. You're rebuilding. That's different." And then he left, giving her space to breathe in her new life. Cicely closed the apartment door and locked it, not out of fear, but out of pride. She pressed her back against the wood and inhaled deeply. This space was hers. This moment was hers. This next chapter belonged to her. As she walked toward the small bedroom, she glanced at the key again on the counter. The tiny piece of metal glowed under the overhead light, representing everything she thought she had lost: security, independence, dignity. But tonight, she reclaimed all three. And for the first time in a long time, Cicely whispered into the quiet, "I'm home." Cicely woke the next morning to a patch of sunlight spilling across her new bedroom floor. It warmed the hardwood, stretching slowly toward her like an invitation to step into a life she chose, not one chosen for her or forced on her. She lay still for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the quiet of her apartment wash over her. No footsteps echoing through a mansion that never felt like hers, no tension waiting behind closed doors, no questions asked in accusing tones, just peace, and the soft hum of possibility. She got up, made herself coffee using the second-hand machine she bought at a thrift store, and sipped it while leaning on the kitchen counter that now felt familiar. If someone had told her months ago that she'd feel grateful standing in a place with creaky floors and chipped paint, she would have laughed. Yet this small, imperfect home held more comfort than any luxury penthouse ever did. She was midway through cleaning up breakfast dishes when her phone buzzed. A text from William. "Good morning. How's day one in your kingdom?" She laughed softly, typing back, "Day one feels like freedom. A moment later, if you're free later, there's something I'd like to share with you. No pressure." Cicely stared at the message. William had never rushed her, never hovered, never insisted. Everything he offered came with space for her to breathe. She typed back, "Come by this evening?" His response came instantly, "I'll bring dessert." By the time evening rolled around, Cicely felt a strange mix of nervousness and curiosity. She wasn't dressing up. She wasn't trying to impress him. But she did smooth her hair and put on a soft knitted sweater that always made her feel comfortable. When she heard the knock, her stomach fluttered, but not from fear. She opened the door to find William holding a small box from a local bakery. "Peace offering," he said, "for your first full day as a queen." She rolled her eyes, smiling. "I'm not a queen yet." He stepped inside gently, handing her the box. "You walked through everything meant to break you and still got here. That's queendom, Cicely." She felt her heart warm at his words. He didn't flatter her, he affirmed her. They sat at the fold-out table again. 2 chairs, 1 overhead light, and a dessert between them that smelled like vanilla and warm sugar. After a few minutes of light conversation, William took a breath, the kind people take when they are about to open a chapter they've kept shut for too long. "Cicely, I want to tell you something, all of it, not bits and pieces." She set down her fork. "I'm listening." He nodded slowly, gathering his thoughts. "I wasn't always this version of myself," he began. "Calm, patient, steady. I had to grow into him." Cicely's eyes softened, encouraging him without interrupting. "For years, I was with someone who drained me, someone who made me question my worth, the same way David did to you." Her breath caught. She hadn't expected that parallel, but it explained the familiarity in some of his words, the quiet understanding in his eyes. I stayed because I kept thinking things would change, he continued, but they didn't. Every month I lost a part of myself, my laugh, my voice, my confidence. He swallowed, then went on. And then one morning I sat in a coffee shop, the same one where I later overheard you, and I realized I didn't recognize myself anymore. I wasn't living. I was maintaining someone else's peace at the expense of my own. Cicely nodded gently. She had lived that too. That day, he said quietly, I promised myself I'd stop shrinking for someone else's comfort. He paused, then looked into her eyes. Your words that afternoon didn't just help me. They freed me. Cicely felt emotion rise in her throat, heavy, tender, real. She had been falling apart at the time, yet her strength had saved someone she didn't even know. William, she whispered. I tell you this, he said, voice steady, because I want you to know you're not alone in what you survived, and I want you to understand something I learned the hard way. He leaned forward just slightly, not invading her space, but offering sincerity. When someone loves you the right way, Cicely, they don't make you feel small. They don't question your intentions every time you breathe wrong. They don't confuse control with care. Her eyes glistened. No one had ever defined love with such clarity before. They love you with steadiness, with room for you to grow, with the kind of gentleness that builds, not destroys. He looked down at his hands for a moment, and I never felt that until now, in the way you exist around me. Cicely blinked, stunned by the honesty. Me? Yes, he said. You. He wasn't declaring love. He wasn't pushing a future onto her. He was acknowledging the space they had naturally created, a space rooted in mutual healing, respect, and truth. She took a breath, steadying her heart. I want to share something too, she said softly. Something I've never said out loud. William straightened, giving her his full attention. In my marriage, the worst part wasn't the accusations. It wasn't even the lies he believed about me. She exhaled, eyes lowering to her hands. The worst part was losing myself. He didn't interrupt. I changed the way I talked, the way I dressed, the way I laughed, all because I kept trying to prove I was enough for him, enough for his world. Tears burned her eyes, and every time I thought I had finally earned a place in his life, his family reminded me I didn't belong, not with words, but with silence, looks, doubt. William's jaw tightened with quiet understanding. I didn't leave because I stopped loving him, Cicely whispered. I left because I realized I was disappearing. The room fell quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of truth, of vulnerability, of the kind of openness that people rarely offer unless they trust someone deeply. William reached out, not to touch her, but to place his hand near hers on the table, close enough to show support, far enough to respect her pace. Thank you for telling me, he said gently. You deserved better. Still do. She nodded, wiping her cheek. I'm learning that now, and you're not learning it alone, he said, voice warm. Not unless you want to. Something unspoken passed between them. Not a promise, not a confession, but the recognition that whatever was growing between them was real, grounded, and patient. It wasn't a rebound. It wasn't desperation. It was two people who knew the weight of hurt, and were slowly discovering what care could feel like. Cicely took a slow breath and smiled. William, thank you for being someone who doesn't rush my healing. You set the pace, he replied. I'm just walking beside you. Her heart warmed, not with intensity, but with comfort. Stay for a little while? She asked. He nodded. As long as you need. And they sat together, not needing big declarations or dramatic gestures, just the simple, powerful presence of someone who saw them clearly. Someone who understood. Someone who cared. That night, in her tiny apartment with mismatched furniture and a dinner that brought laughter, Cicely felt something she hadn't felt in years. Emotionally safe, not because of the apartment, not because of the meal, but because healing didn't feel lonely anymore. And sometimes, that's all a heart needs to begin loving again. Cicely didn't plan to wake up smiling the next morning, but she did. It wasn't the kind of wide, giddy smile people wear after dramatic love confessions. No, it was softer, steady, rooted, like her heart had finally found even ground after months of sinking. Sunlight eased into her apartment again, warming her face as she stretched beneath the blankets. She sat up slowly, savoring the stillness that came with having a space of her own, a space not shaped by judgment or fear. Her eyes drifted to the front door. She remembered the conversation with William the night before, how carefully he held her truth, how patient he was with her pain, how he spoke about love not as something to chase, but something to grow. And for the first time in a long time, Cicely believed she deserved the kind of tenderness he described. She rose, washed her face, and took her time getting ready for the day. There was no rush, no pressure, just the gentle awareness that she was stepping into another morning with strength she had rebuilt piece by piece. By afternoon, she was humming to herself while tidying the apartment when her phone buzzed again. From William. "Any chance you're free for a walk later?" She replied, "Yes, I'd like that." They met near the small park down the street. Not a huge place, not filled with fountains or curated gardens, but a local space where kids played. Neighbors waved from benches, and birds perched on branches that swayed in the breeze. Cicely stood waiting beneath a tree as William approached. His expression was open, warm, and a little hesitant, like he wanted to be mindful of whatever pace she needed. "You look happy today," he said as they began walking. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is mine to rebuild now." He nodded, hands tucked in his pockets. "You've been carrying a lot for a long time. Letting go takes courage. It still scares me," she said honestly. "Starting over, opening up again." "Of course it does," he replied. "Starting over doesn't erase what you went through. It just proves you survived." His words settled over her like a warm blanket. They walked in a comfortable silence for a while, stepping around patches of grass and listening to distant chatter. The moment wasn't romantic in a dramatic sense. It was peaceful in a way that made Cicely feel safe leaning into the quiet. When they reached a low stone wall facing the open field, they sat. William waited, giving her space again, as always. "Can I tell you something?" she asked softly. His eyes met hers with steady patience. "Anything. I used to think the only way to feel valued was to earn it. To be perfect, agreeable, quiet, and grateful even when I wasn't okay." William's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "I twisted myself into someone I didn't recognize just so David's family would accept me. And for a while I believed that bending myself out of shape was love. It wasn't," he said quietly. "That was survival." Cicely swallowed. "I didn't realize how much of myself I erased trying to fit into a world that didn't want me there." William leaned forward slightly. "Cicely, the world you build now will want you exactly as you are." Her breath trembled in her chest. She didn't cry, not this time. This time, she felt something rising inside her that wasn't grief or fear. An opening, a doorway into a different future. They stayed on the wall a while longer before William finally spoke again, his voice low and thoughtful. "I need to be honest with you." She turned to him, heart steady. "You usually are," he exhaled, gathering words carefully. "I don't want to rush anything between us. I don't want to be someone you lean on just because you're rebuilding your life, but—" Her pulse quickened. "But I care about you, Cicely," he continued gently, "deeply. And not because of what you've survived, because of who you are." Her breath caught, but she didn't pull away. He kept a respectful distance, making sure she never felt pushed. "You've shown me strength and softness," he whispered. "You've shown me honesty even when it hurt to say it. You've shown me how someone can rise again without losing their heart." Cicely felt warmth bloom in her chest, a warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She placed her hands in her lap and asked, "Are you saying you want something more?" He took a slow breath. "I'm saying that something more is growing already, but I'm willing to take it one breath at a time. Your pace, your comfort, your journey." Cicely's shoulders relaxed. "I'm not ready for a big leap," she admitted. "I know," he said, "and I'm not asking for one. I just want to walk with you wherever this leads." As the sun lowered, the sky shifted into soft shades of orange and pink. They began walking back toward her apartment side by side, sharing quiet thoughts and gentle smiles. When they reached her building, she paused at the top of the steps, the same steps she climbed last night after claiming her independence. "Thank you for today," she said, And for everything before today. He nodded. Thank you for letting me be part of your world. She turned toward the door, reaching for her key, when William stepped a little closer. Not too close, just enough for her to sense his sincerity. Cicely, he said softly. She looked up. Yes? He held her gaze with a warmth that made her heart steady itself. Months ago, the words that changed her life were asked in confusion and fear. Are you Cicely? But now, the whisper that met her carried hope instead of uncertainty. I'm glad life brought you to me, William murmured. Her breath trembled, but she didn't look away. Because she believed him. She believed in herself. She believed in this quiet, healing, patient connection they were building. Cicely smiled, a real smile, one shaped by strength, not survival. I'm glad it brought me to you too. William stepped back, letting her choose the moment's ending, and she chose to hold his gaze for one more heartbeat before unlocking her door. In the quiet of her apartment, she pressed her back against the wood again, but this time not out of exhaustion, out of gratitude, out of growth, out of a future she finally felt worthy of walking toward. As she turned off the lights, her heart settled peacefully. This was not a rescue story. This was a rebirth story, and she was the author of it. If you were in Cicely's shoes, would you choose the man who broke her trust or the man who helped her rebuild it? Comment your truth below, and if this story touched you, like and subscribe for more stories that remind us we can rise again.